We will now call the meeting of the Waco City Council on September 7th, 2021 to order at 3:05 p.m. All council members are present except for Councilmember Palmer. Would you please join me for a moment of silence? Thank you. We provide an opportunity for the public to address the City Council on any agenda item or during the hearing of visitors portion of the agenda. On items other than public hearings, speakers will be allotted 1 3-minute presentation regardless of the number of agenda items the speaker wishes to address. If you are here to speak and have not filled out a registration card, please see the City Secretary staff at the registration table outside the auditorium to provide registration information so that staff can contact you if necessary. If you have handouts, please let us know at the beginning of your presentation. Staff will distribute those to council. If you are unable to approach the podium due to physical limitations, a microphone is available to be brought to you. Is there anyone who would like to speak on any work session item? Very good. There being no one here to speak on those items, we will move on to our first work session from City Manager Ford.
Thanks, Mayor and City Council members. We don't have any changes to the agenda today. I did want to highlight this September agenda is typically one of our largest. It's over 600 pages that represent the great work by our city staff. So hang on, we got a doozy. Next up, Jennifer, I believe you had a new staff member introduction you wanted to do.
Thanks, Bradley. If Christy Drake Adams would stand up. Christy joined our office a week ago as a senior assistant city attorney. Prior to joining our team, Christy served as the director of legal services for Texas Municipal League. She's been an attorney for the Texas Municipal League since 2010. Prior to that, she worked in the opinion committee division of the Texas Attorney General's office and in private municipal law firms. She has 21 years of legal experience, with over 17 of those being in municipal law, including economic development. And she also, watch out Bradley, has a Master of Public Administration degree. So we want to welcome Christy to our team. She's going to be a valuable resource, and her and her family will soon be moving to Waco as well.
Welcome to Waco. You're joining a great legal team. We're so lucky to have Jennifer as our city attorney, and she's got an incredible staff of people. I know you're going to feel hopefully very welcome, but also get ready. There's a lot of exciting things happening in the city, and we're so thankful to be able to draw on your experience and years at TML and other areas of your practice. So welcome aboard. We're so glad you're here and thankful you're going to be part of the team.
Thanks, Mayor. She has hit the ground running, that's for sure.
Awesome.
We do have one informal report on the agenda today, Council. It's IR 563, an update on critical water utilities projects. The first section of that report highlights the mall-to-mall information that I'll address here in a few minutes related to a resolution. The second part of the IR covers the Washington Street bridge closure. This is an update, some new information from a previous communication to the Council in June, when we estimated that we'd have about an 8-week bridge closure on Washington that was going to start in June. Unfortunately, delays in material production has prevented the project from starting on time, and being good partners with a variety of event holders downtown, we've made the decision to delay the closure of the bridge all the way until just after the Martin Luther King holiday on January 17th, 2022. So that project will be a little behind schedule. Recognizing those facts.
This is Holmes. I'll just comment on that first one, Bradley. It's so important that we're able to get this utility work done as we coordinate that project with, I know you're going to talk about it more during the resolutions, but as we coordinate that project with TxDOT, because I know they have a relatively ambitious start schedule on that by the end of the year. And I just reading through that is gut wrenching, because you're having to deal with changes in material costs and getting this done with the true deadline in place. So I appreciate the work you're doing there on the State Highway 6 utility improvement. Such an important part of the transportation system, as we have those big companies moving in there, Amazon, Ooze and Oots, and Vossys, and others. So it's important that we keep the traffic moving there. So I appreciate your work on that. Good report.
Thanks. For public hearings today, council, we have 16 on the agenda. The first public hearing sets the tax rate at 76.7282 cents, which, as the council is well aware, is just a penny or a 0.9 cents lower than the prior year. The second and third public hearings address the updated service and assessment plans for Public Improvement District Number 1 and 2. And the final 13 public hearings are planning-related items that Clint Peters will cover later on in the work session. Resolutions, we have 42 on the agenda today, and I'm going to highlight 3 briefly. The first is Resolution 590, which is an economic development agreement, which provides up to $6 million from the Waco-McLennan County Economic Development Corporation to support a 2-phase expansion project by SpaceX in McGregor. This agreement would ensure that SpaceX's presence would continue to grow here in Central Texas. The McGregor site would see the addition of the most advanced rocket engine factory in the world to produce Raptor engines for SpaceX. Employment at the site after all phases would increase from the current 587 full-time employees to approximately 970 full-time employees. The funds for this agreement are available in the WEDMEC fund, and as a reminder, the city provides half of the dollars into that fund and the county provides the other half.
City Manager Ford, I'd like to say thank you for bringing this or highlighting this resolution this afternoon. Once again, just to echo what Mayor Meek said earlier, the great things that are going on in Waco, Texas, especially even from our economic point of view, that we have this type of investment from corporations around the world that are investing in Waco, Texas, that are creating these types of jobs that are really changing the trajectory and the livelihood of many of our constituents. And so I'm very grateful to see this on the agenda, and I would be very grateful to support this resolution as well. So thank you for highlighting it.
I'll echo Mayor Pro Tem Sabito on that. This is fantastic. SpaceX, a global company, Elon Musk, in addition to Jeff Bezos and Amazon, big companies are moving to Waco. I mean, because people want to come here. The secret's out, obviously. Waco's a great place to live and work. But there's 400 new jobs, 150 million investment in Central Texas. And our commitment is phased in over a couple of different phases of their work. So I think that part is important too, as we put our money in, as they put their money in. In addition, there's these other benefits we're getting. They're helping us out in Mayborn Museum and with the STEAM program. And I think this is a win-win, and another way that Waco is being put on the map in a lot of good ways here.
Yep.
City Manager, thank you for highlighting this. I think it's incredibly important, and I echo my council members and in strong support of this for many reasons, all the ones that they've mentioned, but especially the commitment that SpaceX has given to advancing some of the city's projects, specifically the STEAM Center. I know that when we first began the conversation with what would it be like if we had a facility, a space that could advance science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, and we looked down at the deep bench that we have in Waco and the amazing industry giants that we have here, and SpaceX was one of the very first to raise a hand to say, hey, we don't know what we can do yet, but we're in. And so seeing their written commitment to that, as well as just all of the support and things that they've given leading up to this is amazing and indicative of who and what they are and have been for this community.
I think it's clear that Waco is a desirable city for the world's most interesting and exciting companies. SpaceX will provide first-in-class jobs to our economy, has committed to being an excellent corporate partner, and on top of that is doing incredibly interesting things. One of the emails I received from Chris Collins at the Chamber said that the work that SpaceX will do here in McLennan County, here in our community, will be work that is designed to carry both crew and cargo on long-duration interplanetary flights and help humanity return to the moon and travel to Mars and beyond. That work is being done in this community. And I think that that speaks to, again, as I said, the reality that Waco is a desirable city for the world's most interesting and exciting companies. So, again, what a thrill to see, yes, first-in-class jobs come to our community, yes, science and technology being developed, but also just the banner that Waco can wave, that we are a city that is made for the kind of organizations that are doing big, exciting, incredible things. And I'm excited to get behind this economic development deal. It's not without strategy and work that organizations like this come to Waco. Organizations like this are here because we have a legal team who's working their tails off to make sure that this happens. Our organizations like this come to Waco because we have an economic development team in a city manager's office who are working around the clock to get organizations like this to increase the number of good jobs in our community, because we have good partners at the county and our chambers of commerce. So I'm thankful for all of the partners who have made this become a reality, from our own city team as well as outside of the four walls of City Hall. So thanks to all involved, and I'm excited to support this.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. Next resolution I wanted to highlight is Resolution 605, which is actually an agreement to purchase 2.208 acres of property from LG Callan LLC for the purpose of constructing a fire station in the future at the corner of Ritchie Road and Panther Way. A total of $375,000 is being allocated to the effort, with $325,000 available for the purchase price and the remaining available for closing fees, surveying, and other expenses related to the purchase. For those interested in watching, a new station at this growing location is not anticipated immediately, but this purchase does allow us to be prepared and move quickly once it's time to build a new fire station.
City Manager Ford, I want to applaud you and your team for the acquisition of this real estate here. I think this is a nice strategic location for Fire Station, I believe 16, coming online in the next few years. And I appreciate the city's efforts to continue to invest in West Waco, as the census data we're about to explore shows just the explosive growth out there along Ritchie. So thank you, and I think the residents out there are very excited about having responsive fire service, as they have, but more so in the future.
Thanks, Councilmember.
Councilmember and the city manager, there's, that may actually be for fire station number 15, and if that's true, you will get an updated resolution at the break, so.
In terms of what it's actually numbered?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You know, those fire chiefs, they like to add new fire stations a lot. Chief, are you getting me hooked into 15 and 16 here?
Certainly lose track of them all.
Plan to hear him. He's got a plan for 16. I love it. I love it. Thank you, Jennifer, for that highlight.
No, just this Holmes, yeah, I just want to echo that sentiment of great work on the fire stations. There's other resolutions. There's a lot of them, 41 of them today, but there's many that have to do with our support of fire and police. Radar equipment here for the police. There's some tag stuff in here, Texas Anti-Gang. I just think that shows our commitment to or demonstrates our commitment to fire and safety here in this growing community that we have. And this is just the new fire station isn't very exciting, but there's other kind of nuts and bolts stuff in here too that where we're demonstrating our commitment to keep the police and fire departments well equipped.
That's right. The final resolution I wanted to highlight is Resolution 626. I referred to it earlier. It's actually a ratification item to add $202,288 to the utility relocation portion of the mall-to-mall project. We made the decision to push this ratification forward. It was due to supply chain challenges for large diameter PVC pipe for our general contractor on this project. We really, as Councilmember Holmes mentioned earlier, needed to approve this and have it ultimately ratified by the council so that TxDOT can stay on their construction schedule for the mall-to-mall project early next year. Without approaching the project this way, frankly, we would have at best receive the PVC pipe in late October of 2021, and at worst later on, which would have certainly caused for delays in our project and theirs. So appreciate your attention to that. Ordinance-wise, we have 3 on the agenda today. 2 are first readings, and the third is a second reading. Ordinance 2021-627 is a first reading establishing administrative departments of the City of Waco. This is a routine item that you see every year, and it's required by Article 5, Section 3 of the City Charter. Ordinance 628 is a first reading, adding 3 positions to the fire department. And this, of course, was in your filed fiscal year 21-22 budget, increasing the number of firefighter grade 1 positions from 78 to 81. This change will be effective October 1 of 2021 with the new fiscal year.
City Manager, if you'll allow me, I just wanted to bring kudos to you as far as management, Chief Summers, and leadership of fire, and intentionally, as we grow our department, intentionally seeking out people of color and women in recruitment to advance the growth of our fire department. We understand that equity in our employment is a priority. However, there are some departments that is harder than others. And I think that I was having a conversation with one of the firefighters who's not from here, but he mentioned, he is a person of color, and mentioned that, you know, he grew up across the street, living across the street from a fire station. And so, and his community was a community of color. And it is the reason he is a firefighter. And I think that children can only be what they see. And it's important and imperative to send a message of what that looks like, of what we look like. And so I am certainly supportive of advancing our firefighters, because I mean, you know, from personal and just physical stances, we are growing and need as many as possible. But the intentionality of it is what I wanted to highlight today. And so I hope that this class is reflective.
I think Chief we'll be able to follow up with you, Council, with some good updates in that regard on this,
Awesome.
on the class that's coming.
Awesome.
This is Holmes. I just want to make a quick comment on ordinance 627. And it's laid out on page 583 for those of you watching at home today. And these are basically the cost center, what I consider cost centers, profit centers coming from private sector, and 24 different major groups. There's subcategories under each of these, but I think it's always good for me to look at this. I know we do it once a year, and I think nothing's changed from last year. I think we had 24 last year, 24 this year, but you can see all the different, again, profit centers, cost centers, divisions, platforms, whatever you want to call them, that our teams are responsible for. And you can see there's a lot of things going on here in the city, which is reflected not only by that, but also our budget. But to me, it's a good way to say, you know, each one of these groups has a P&L under it that we track closely and manage. And I just appreciate seeing it kind of laid out like that. That's a good exercise. Thanks.
All right. And our final ordinance is second reading of the negotiated settlement between Atmos Steering Committee and Atmos Energy Corporation Midtex Division. If there's no further questions on the agenda, that concludes my report.
Mayor and Council, for the record, Councilmember Borderoot has filed affidavit of substantial interest on Public Hearing 570 and Resolution 607. So Resolution 607 will have to be pulled from the consent agenda and voted on separately. The Council has also all filed an affidavit of substantial interest on item 587. And that's all I have.
Thank you. At this time, we will move to our first work session. Is that right, Riley? You want to introduce that?
I can. I'll try. Just having a little technical glitch here, but I'm welcoming Mike Morrison to the floor here. He's going to provide an update on the redistricting process in work session 564, possibly resulting from 2020 census. As council is well aware, Mike is a former mayor and city council member here at the city of Waco, and he's under contract to provide these services and has done so a number of times for our community and is well respected throughout the state. Mike?
Professor Morrison, really quick before you get started, I forgot to do this. I want to see if there's any consent agenda items we need to pull. So the consent agenda includes resolutions 2021-585 through resolutions 2021-626. Are there any items that council would like to remove from the consent agenda other than those that have been pulled because of a conflict of interest? If not, the consent agenda will include resolutions 2021-585 through 2021-626, except for 607. So with that, we will turn it over to you, Professor Morrison. I apologize.
What's the rule about this mask? It clogs my glasses. Are you saying I've been punctured all over? I noticed this little box in front of me says I'm done.
Prophetic.
Well, thank you very much. If you'll go to the next slide, go ahead and put it all up. The first 4 or 5 of these slides is just a review of what we've already talked about. I thought I'd put them up and ask if there are any questions before we get into the report itself. The first, of course, just deals with one person, one vote. We'll see that apply.
Sorry, I don't think
Your mic
his
is
mic
not
is
on.
not on.
Yeah,
I think it's on. I'm
There
just
we go.
not
There we go.
speaking to it.
all right.
Usually people are asking me to quit talking. The first slide is simply laying out the one person, one vote standard that we have to meet. We'll come back to that briefly in context. We'll move to the next one. Go ahead. This is simply the statutory and constitutional authority that stands behind the equal protection of everyone, and in particular of citizens who are of color or who have a member of a protected ethnic minority. And the next slide, if you would. This simply outlines what we're trying to do. I'll cut the suspense, determining whether redistricting is required, as you each know from what you've received. Stop me if there are any questions. I know this is all repeat, so probably there aren't. The one thing at the bottom I want to point out is that it's an equal protection violation to fail to protect minority voting access. It's also an equal protection violation to focus only on that and let that be the primary driving factor. And the devil of the details there is where to draw that balance, and it's one the Supreme Court has basically said, we'll let you know what we think when we see it. So it's an area where a back and forth discussion and community involvement is very important to help this council draw a wise line there. Go ahead. And that's what this slide's talking about. At the very top, what follows is simply some of the principles to the extent that you could have balanced population more closely, or to the extent that minority access to the process could have been made better, then you made it. These are examples of factors that are taken into account that are justifications for less than precision. And if you'll notice, as I've mentioned to you before, those factors aren't to protect any of you sitting up there. They're to protect the people who've sent you here. And so each one of them, while it sounds self-serving, and we talk about politicians being able to select their voters as opposed to vice versa, it's pretty clear here that from the law's standpoint, the purpose of incumbency, existing districts, election precincts, existing election precincts, probably not quite as important with the system in use now in Waco and McLennan County. But if you're as old as I am, you can remember showing up to vote at the Bethel Baptist Church and finding out it's been moved to the Little League, and you can't get there in time to get to work. And so one of the things that harms access is moving those polling places around. Thank you. Okay, next slide. According to the 2020 census, I want to point out a couple of things on this slide. One is, if you look at the top left, you see kind of mustard colored highlights. The one I'll point out right now is the census count for Waco is 138,486. The population in Waco that still needs a little refinement through your staff helping me on annexations is actually 1,317 people higher, and it's largely due to a large subdivision that was annexed down at the very southwestern end of District 3. And when you add that, it was not in the census count for the city of Waco. It's an existing part of Waco, but when the census was drawn, that feature was not made a part of Waco. There are going to be some other changes to these numbers, but they will be in the low hundreds at the most, and that's because a number of the annexations and also the proposed land swap with Beverly Hills, a number of those split the census counting blocks. So a census enumeration block will tell you how many people you have in an area. But when we do annexations or in the land swap, the line that's been drawn to separate one from the other cuts a census block. And I won't go into the weeds on it because it's not that important right now. But for example, you have, these are each single census blocks of 314, 103, 195, 8 that are all split by one of the city lines. And then we have several more that are split but have no population. So while that still needs to be refined on the map, it doesn't have an impact on the numbers. But the first four will nudge numbers up or down a little bit as we allocate those, and that'll just involve some reasonable estimates of how that population is distributed through those blocks. So that's the reason for that. The ideal is 27,960. That's simply a fifth of the total. What you can see on the chart, if you'll just really go to the far right, District 1 is almost 2,000 people low. District 2 is over 1,600 low. 3, almost 3,750 high. 4, 3,500 low. And 5, 3,400 high. The total, it's down at the very bottom. I don't know if the audience can see it. You all were able to see it, but the maximum variance is 7,309. That's simply the difference between District 3 and District 1. District 3 and District 4, I'm sorry. The maximum deviation, which needs to be under 10%, is over 26%. So we do have to redistrict. And there are about 1 million ways to approach it. I usually start off with some lines to begin a discussion. I'll show you what those are in a moment, but those lines are not a plan, they're not a suggestion. I've always found it helpful over 40 years of doing this to present something that could get a discussion started. If I don't, it's kind of like if I wanted to go and buy a blue tie. Until you show me some blue ties, I really don't know which one I want. You show me a blue tie, I can say no, that's not it. I want to see another one. That's pretty much what this discussion model is. And the range of that, some councils or school boards or legislators, when they look at something like that, say, that's the first time I've ever seen anything where there's absolutely nothing about it I like. It's not going to hurt my feelings. It helps me to hear what is bad about a model that we're looking at, because it gives me a place to start working. And usually I'm told what's bad about it, and that gives me an idea of what I'm trying to fix. So when these lines come up, my suggestion is don't bond with them. If you see a line you really like, let me know. Maybe it's a line that'll stay in once the council as a whole has looked at it. If you see one that is just wrong, I mean, once I sat up there where you are, but it's been 20 years since I was sitting where the mayor is, 21 years. You know your districts so much better. You know, I knew mine when I was on the council, but you lose. So when I put these up, don't fall in love with them. If you hate them, let me know. But no one ought to think that this is somehow more than just a discussion. It's not a plan, and it's not really even a suggestion. It's just something that's sitting down at the computer I could look at and say, there's some things about this I think might be good. And so as we turn to that, let's first look at the numbers. If you would, go to the next, over their slides. What I tried to do in this, and this is one of those you can love, hate, or feel indifferent about, what I always try to do is balance the population within a reasonable amount and try to address, generally, the minority profile. Now, even if you fell in love with this, it's incomplete because we have to deal with annexations that we don't know the count of and how we're going to deal with the Beverly Hills land swap. But two, the population could be balanced better if that's important to us, and certainly there are ways to enhance the minority profile in some districts. So I don't spend hundreds of hours coming up with this. What I do is come up with something that has as few changes as possible from the existing as a starting point. And I can't say off enough times, if you absolutely hate this, you'll never see it again. But if you see anything about it that makes sense, I'd like to talk to you about it. If you would go to the next slide, we'll get a little more detail. These are the areas, and what I've done in those, with one exception, is moved entire voting precincts, honoring the election precincts. As soon as you do something, with the exception of a small area moving from District 5 to District 3, what this does is it robs a little from 4 to create more of a population balance in 1 that helps preserve a minority profile. It allows 5 to move some election precincts to 4. That move to do whole election precincts moves more than really necessary, so 3 needed to shed a little bit under the way these lines are drawn. 3, as you can see down southeast of the Beverly Hills area, has given some to 2. And so 3 also offloaded a little bit to 5. And what that does is bring us down within constitutional tolerances. What it does not do is represent something that's necessarily wise. So I guess if you would, we'll come back to this in a moment, but if you would move on, we can look at what the numbers are. So here are the numbers. And now nobody's over 1,000 out. They're pretty well balanced. It's down to a maximum deviation of 5.62%. On the right, it says Board of Estimates at 4.68. That's a Second Circuit opinion that I use as a reference, but we don't really rely on because the Supreme Court hadn't adopted it. But under the Second Circuit opinion in Board of Estimates versus Norris, when you have a group like this where you have single-member districts and a mayor or someone at large, the fact that everybody gets to vote for 2 members of the council, they get to vote for their district councilman and they get and they get to vote for the mayor, that allows an adjustment to the maximum deviation. And so that's what you see. But again, that's a Second Circuit. We've relied on it with the Justice Department in the past, and the Justice Department has accepted it, but as you know, we don't have to go there any longer. So the minority profile has, in 1 and in 2, has actually, let's see my notes. 1 and 2 are nominally the same. They've each gone up just a hair. In 3, the total minority profile has dropped by almost 2%. In 4, it's dropped by about 3.5%, and in 5 by almost 3%. Now, every one of those percentages can probably be improved, but the way to improve it is to start breaking up election precincts, getting some ragged edges. Not a thing wrong with that, but that's not something that I would do without the input from the council and with y'all not having yet had input from advisory committee, so, our citizens. I know none of y'all have seen this before. It's kind of a big gulp to take at one time. So I'd like to give you the opportunity to sort of ask me things about it and make sure that we give the public an understanding of what this process is and what it isn't. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to take whatever questions or suggestions or comments, either about any of these details or about the process going forward.
Any questions?
Just Holmes over here, just right quick, Professor Morrison, thanks for pulling this together. And again, just to remind folks, it's population is the deal. It's not voters or anything else. It's or gross population. And then we are, just in our first stab here, it looks like we are splitting a couple of the precincts, right?
We are.
And most of that is because it's easy to go through them here and just, make them perfectly, very close to the same, but it seems to me the minority profile is what we're trying to preserve, and that's the real art to this.
Well, Councilmember Holmes, you're right. But they're of equal dignity to the extent that balancing population necessarily involves a reduction in minority participation. The Constitution controls equal protection. The first item of equal protection is to balance population. But we've got a range. I brought it down to a little above 5. We don't get a ribbon for going down to 3. We won't have to do this again for 10 years. No matter how low we get it, 10 years from now it's going to be out of whack again. So if we could come up with a better plan that had an 8% maximum deviation and we had a reason why it was at 8%, I would have no problem at all with that. But it's important, as you point out, that we're not talking about voters. One person, one vote. It used to be called one man, one vote, and it's perfectly accurate, except it's not limited to men and it's not limited to voters. It's just balanced population.
Thanks, Professor.
Professor Morrison, thank you for your continued consistency in walking us through redistricting. This is my first one as an active participant in it. I've watched from the sidelines for a while, but let's talk about breaking boxes, because I know when you know your boxes, the ones, your precincts like the back of your hand. So let's talk about what breaking boxes does, because I know how many boxes it takes to win one. That's the way we were taught. And so I want to talk about what breaking boxes looks like as far as how our makeup shifts.
Okay. Did you want to tell me something about it or want me to talk to you about it?
No, I want you to talk to me to make sure that I'm in full understanding.
Well, some of what I've learned early on was from a woman who, before I became mayor and before she became mayor, was teaching me some of this back 30 plus years ago, and that was your mama. Mm-hmm. There are a couple things about breaking boxes. Mm-hmm. The box itself is more a matter of convenience, and it used to matter a lot.
Right.
Because at one time, a county could not draw an election precinct that had more than one state house, state senate, U.S. Congress, state board of education, or council member in a city of 10,000 or more. Since the last redistricting, that last requirement has been removed from the election code. And so now, so one factor that made it important, because if we didn't honor them, the county had to redo all its election precincts. And so for the last 30 years, we've tried to do that in lockstep. The way you elect now, where I can go to one of several, if I can find it, I can go to one of several places and get a ballot and vote. That part of it's less important.
Right.
Because no longer do I show up at First Baptist Church and find out I should have gone to First Pres. Where it is important, and the election precinct lines may or may not have a direct relationship, but where it is important is when we're talking about communities of interest. And to the extent that an election precinct has fairly well-defined community of interest, leaving that hole not only gets the voters there, but whatever organization they've come up with, whatever phone lists they have, the structure that they've put together to work an election, if the election precinct itself is sort of a synonym for that community of interest, then we want to maintain it, not because it's an election precinct really, but because it's identified as an area that there's some strength to being kept together. Is that responsive?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So as we walk through this, and we understand that there may be some changes into those boxes, but you foresee that there's a certain way that we can do this with that as a minimum?
Well, that's what I've tried to do here, and Councilman Holmes has already pointed out where I split one. I think, in all honesty, we could probably come under 10% by leaving all the election boxes whole. But in doing that, I think we would have devastating consequences on some of the minority access. And so to protect minority access, I end up putting more or fewer people in a district than would be ideal. And I've got to make up for that somewhere else. And so 3 and 5 needed to offload some things, but 3 and 5 had such a strong non-minority profile that I had to be very careful where I thought about doing that, because if they go to 1, if they go to 2, if they go to 4, and where else is there? Every election precinct I move in could have, and as you see in 3 and 4 and 5, a reduction. By splitting the box, you can ameliorate that to some extent. Now, when I first started doing this back in the early 80s, Waco really could have been sort of defined by East Waco and South Waco. And that's where a lot of districts drew their strength. We're where we ought to be, or where we want to. We're making progress to being where we want to be. And that is where it's harder and harder to find 27,000 people who are of color. We don't want that to be easy any longer. And so each time we do this in balancing population, Councilwoman, we end up, I think, having to struggle hard to not stay at the level we were. And the other thing is, you've looked at our districts, the Hispanic origin and the African American or black profile are going in opposite directions. For the first, the white profile can continue up, but as a percentage, it's not going up. And so if you look at total minority going back over some years, districts that at one time had a very close balance among African American and Hispanic origin, you now see that shifting. And so while the total minority profile may have stayed up, if you look more closely at what race or ethnicity is doing that, you're beginning to see that play out in the districts the same way it's playing out in the state.
I don't recall, was 2010 census, had the Anglo population, was it still over 50% at 2010?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. So this is the first time it shifted to POC, right?
Well, I've worked every census since the 1970, and in every census, while numbers increase, the African American profile has gone down, And the first three, the Hispanic profile almost doubled every 10 years. It didn't this time because at some point it's hard to double again. But that's a part of the challenge because a good bit of this is making sure that we don't make it easy on ourselves and say, well, the profile has gone down, therefore, of course, the numbers are going to follow. That doesn't necessarily follow, but it shouldn't be a surprise if at the end of the day we find that to come up with a plan that looks workable, we're not going to have the same minority profile breakdown in every district as we had after the 2010 census.
Gotcha.
And you can see that in those lines under the 2020 census. Is that responsive? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Professor Hollis, thank you for this great education in these work sessions that you've presented to us. I'm learning a lot, still a lot to learn about this process, and look forward to working with you and this council on redrawing these lines. The map that you've presented as somewhat of a kind of point of departure or kind of talking points for us to consider here. I feel like I generally understand what you did and why you did it. With one exception, there's a little piece of District 5 coming to me under this kind of, first draft map or rough draft map. And can you kind of explain to me, the reason I ask is because it looks like my district grew about roughly 6,000 or so since the last census, and it looks like I'm shedding roughly about 4,000 residents, and so is District 5 is shedding a lot. So what was the rationale? Was that more of equal protection grounds there?
Really, well, it was really related to District 2. Mm-hmm. You only touch 1, 4, and 5. You only touch 2, 4, and 5. The district that was moved from 3 to 2 was the closest election precinct that could be added to 2 without having an unnecessarily harsh impact on the minority profile. Having done that, your district was actually in pretty good shape, but Councilmember Holmes was not. And he needed to shed some people. And if he gave it to either District 1 or District 4, it was going to hurt the minority profile. So you drew the bean. But, as I say, you don't have to fall in love with this. There are other ways to skin this cat.
Well, that is a very coherent and persuasive explanation of why that is, but I just was curious, so thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Well, I hope it was coherent. It wasn't meant to be persuasive. I'll settle for coherence most days.
That's right.
Professor Morrison, as my colleagues have said, thank you so much for the presentation. I, like many of my council members, this is the first time that we're going through the redistricting process, and obviously there are a lot of questions that we have, a lot of unknowns still that we don't know what's to come, and so I appreciate your work with us over the last several months to really bring us up to speed and what we need to look out for, what we need to look about. But one of the things that you said earlier in your presentation really just resonated with me, and you said redistricting is about not protecting us, but protecting the people we represent. And so in that same spirit, I think it is completely imperative that we are making sure that we are including our community, our constituents in the steps that are to come down the road. I appreciate the preliminary lines that you have drawn with the redistricting process, but I only feel it's due diligence on my part as an elected official that I am making sure that I am including my constituents in the process, or at least having them an opportunity to ask questions, voice their concerns, or maybe even point out things to us that we don't even know that are there, because no one knows the neighborhood like the people that live in that neighborhood. Right. And no one knows the impact that changes will have like the people in that neighborhood. And so it would be not smart on my part to make sure that we are not including my constituents in the changes and the development and the growth that's going on in District 2. So as we move forward, what would that process look like in inviting the community members to have a say-so in the redistricting process? And even more so, I will preface it by saying this. Historically speaking, people of color have been, for lack of better words, have to overcome obstacles in being represented or voting. And so I know it is the dream and the goal of my council that we eliminate that even on the city level as much as possible. And so how do we ensure their voices are being heard as we move forward with this process?
Well, first of all, what you've said about the role of a council person is what I believed when I was on the council. And I would be disappointed in you if you didn't feel the way you do. So kudos. Let me give you a concrete example of citizen involvement. And we've done it a couple of ways, but maybe I can give this. It was working on the WISD after the 2010 census. And we had a plan that looked good to the board, good enough to go to public hearing. You know, you don't want to go to public hearing with a plan you've decided on, but you've got to go to public hearing with something close enough to something you might want so the public knows what to respond to. So we go to a public hearing, and we had the Citizens Advisory Committee that was working with the school board at that time present, and all of a sudden one of them stood up and walked over to an area over to the east of Baylor and said, "You've put this block in here, you've put it into an area that is a minority board area." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Why'd you do that?" I said, "Well, there are 8 people there. It looked like a good fit." He said, "Do you know that they're planning an apartment complex there for Baylor students?" I said, "No." I said, "Well, when that apartment complex is filled out, if they decide to vote in local elections, which they may not, what will that do?" That's a classic example, council member, of where the public input comes. There are 2 ways to do it. In the past, because the Justice Department reacted well to it, we use citizen advisory committees. One of our problems right now is in 2011, we had submitted the city plan, David Gwynn and I had submitted the city plan to Justice a month ago. We've lost 7 months in the process. I want to keep you on track. A Citizens Advisory Committee, and you know, you can do it any way you want, but in the past, it's been, you know, everybody appoint a couple of people that are really representative and well-respected within the community they're expected to represent, someone you have confidence in, but equally importantly, the people within your district have confidence in. And I would meet with them a couple of times and pretty much do what I'm doing with y'all and say, "Listen, I don't want you to tell me what you agree with." A lot of people are afraid to hear disagreement. I want to hear disagreement because, one, it may be I can tell you something you don't know and you're going to feel better about what's been done. 2, it may be you can tell me something I didn't know and I can come up with a better plan. And 3, if you're not buying what I'm selling and I'm not interested in what you're selling, at least I know what you're going to argue later on that I have to think through how to deal with. So that's one approach. That approach adds several weeks to the process. We can work around that, but it adds several weeks. Another that I think more of my clients this time are doing is each council member getting a couple of people just the same way, but working with them and with me to identify what's important in that district. And that could move along a little more quickly. I think we have time to do either one.
Great.
One of the advantages to the council of that is when we do have the public hearing, if the people that you've involved, we ask them to come and we ask them to participate. It's helpful for folks who are having to swallow the pig all in one gulp at the public hearing to hear from other than the lawyer or the elected representatives, but from people they know and trust, to say, "Look, we spent a month looking at this, and we've considered some of the things you've raised, and we feel pretty comfortable with how that's turned out." But as you know, the key there is to identify people who, like each of you, have the confidence and support of those who you're relying on. Is that helpful?
It is very helpful, you know, and I think one of the biggest things that the decision on how we redistrict obviously will impact us for the next 10 years. And so I don't expect perfection or inaccuracies.
That's good.
But I do want fairness.
Absolutely.
And transparency and honesty. And so that is, to me, one of my core beliefs is that we are being transparent and honest as much as possible with the people that we represent. And in that conversation, as we have community members, that we also have the opportunity as council members to even engage ourselves with those community members to see what's important to them, what do they want to see. Once again, things that are in our blind spot that they're possibly catching. And so I guess for me, the biggest message is we have to have community involvement
Absolutely.
going forward. There is no other ways around that.
If there's, no, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, I'm sorry.
If there's ever any challenge to this, that community involvement is what's going to make a difference when we began looking at choices that were made that were honestly and adequately explained and received support. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine, you're fine. Well, the only thing I was going to say, one of the things that I find comfort in is that we have a group of people, stakeholders in our community that are vested in our city and our community, which I love. Doesn't mean we always agree, but at least they're invested just like we are, and we can work together. And so I think it's only our due diligence to make sure that even those people that are as invested as us or more or not as much, whichever the case may be, but they make sure that each one of them feels heard. And so I think that's the important takeaway for me. So thank you so much for this afternoon.
I have the burden of being the unfortunate expert who has to live where he's given advice. It's nice to be able to go to some other part of the state and leave and they blame everything on me. But for 40 years, I've been doing this in McLennan County and Waco, and I think I've earned some respect and trust.
Absolutely.
And I hope that will be of benefit to the process.
Thank you.
Just to wrap up here, Professor.
Before you, Mayor, I had one more question. I don't want to go after you. But where would I find out on where my precinct, one of my precincts is being split? I don't expect you to know this off the top of your head, but is that Rambler? Who would I ask to where that actual?
Jim, just send me an email,
Okay.
and I will send you a blow-up of that map.
Super. Thanks, Professor.
To the best of my knowledge, you're still in your district.
I got to double check, yeah.
But I'm only doing it on behalf of the voters.
A popular demand.
You could send me that too. I think it's the same precinct that we may be
Yeah.
talking about there.
Send you different maps. Sure, I'll be happy to.
Thanks, Professor. I'm sorry, Mayor.
For next steps, for council members to have a chance to kind of dive into the weeds and maybe meet with you one-on-one, could you kind of outline what you suspect that could look like? I mean, I've heard you say that before that you're available to us. Is that still on the table?
Yeah. I've got traveling to do. The last time I did this, I had 60 clients in the state of Texas, and this time I've cut that by almost 75% because I don't have as much energy as I used to. But I think what would be most useful is for each of the members of the council to get some citizen input, show them some of these, find out what pinches and what looks like it might be okay, ask them what the problem is, or ask them what, if anything, they see good about something, and then maybe consider bringing one or two of them and letting me know, and we'll find a time, we'll sit down at the computer, and we can do a little gaming on how we might address that. The one thing that would, and I'll leave this to you and your legal counsel, I don't want you to end up any public meetings issues, but to the extent that you're dealing with a common border, some discussion between the two involved, not three, between the two might move things along a little more quickly. Otherwise, it can be a little like a ping pong match. Just, the ball just keeps going back and forth. But whenever you're ready, let me know. I will be in town most of the time. I will be able to find a time in the not distant future, if you'll be a little flexible with me on when we meet.
Great. Thank you, Professor. We appreciate your time today.
All right,
It's gonna
thank
be
you.
Great. Great stuff ahead. For the next work session, I think our Development of Director Services, Clint Peters, is going to be making a presentation, and as he comes up, we are running about 30 minutes behind on our timeline here. So as we move forward, that was an important discussion that I think a lot of each of us care much about, so I didn't want to rush the discussion. But as we move forward, bear in mind that we're running about 30 minutes behind right now. To accomplish all we need to accomplish and all that's in our work session, or our executive session.
All right, thank you, Mayor, City Council. We do have 13 public hearings today. The first two are dealing with voluntary annexations. The first one being a 56-acre tract out on Ritchie Road, actually in that area that Professor Morrison was talking about, where some of the growth has happened in subdivisions along Ritchie Road. You can see here it is part of the Park Meadows South Edition. Phase 2 includes 232 units, and it's currently under construction. The infrastructure is. We'll have R1B zoning, and this will be part of District 3 once annexed. And then the other voluntary annexation is a 442-acre property out on the west side of McGregor Airport. This is a new subdivision called the West End Edition that will have 600 lots. Probably a little slower development pattern than the one on Ritchie Road, probably about a 10-year build out. This one is a little bit different. That it includes actually City of McGregor property that's in Waco's ETJ that connects to Hidden Valley. So that is actually being annexed, and City of McGregor was part of the petition to request annexation into Waco. That is a protection zone for the McGregor Airport runway, and so will remain undeveloped, but will be the portion that attaches to our current city limits, so the development area can be annexed. And so all this is where this kind of tan color is where the development will occur with the Western Addition. This is R1A zoning for the McGregor portion, and then the remainder where the development is a PUD, and you can just see the layout for the subdivision. That's actually already come through council for approval. It's kind of a hybrid between Hidden Valley and Twin Rivers developments. Both of these, and this will be in District 5 once annexed. Both of these, again, are voluntary annexations and recommended for approval by the Plan Commission. So the next 11 public hearings are all short-term rentals. If you remember, the council adopted some changes to our short-term rental ordinance that effectively removes the type 2s and type 3s from all the special permit sections of different zoning districts. And 9 of these are short-term rental type 2s and 3s. These were applications that were received before that effective date of the ordinance. So this will be the last time you see special permit applications for type 2s and 3s. The first 2 are type 1s, and those will remain available for people to ask for special permits with the new ordinance. The first one is at 3201 Colcord Avenue. This is a type 1 and R1B zoning. This is in the Dean Highland neighborhood in District 4. Type 1 is a owner-occupied residence where the owners do live in the home and are present when the guests are there. This is a single-family house at the corner of 34th and Colcord that actually has a basement, and that's where the short-term rental will be, in the basement of that home. We mailed out 28 notices on this one and just had 1 opposed. Plan Commission did recommend this one by a vote of 10-0. And the next one is another type 1 at 805 Fort Gates Drive. This is out in the North Lake Waco Neighborhood Association in District 5 off of Steinbeck Bend. Single family home, 2-bedroom single family home. Again, owner occupied, recommends to rent out 1 of the 2 bedrooms. No opposition on, we just have 1 opposition on this one. and Plan Commission recommended approval of it by a vote of 10-0.
Clint Holmes here, when you had one opposition, and maybe just answer for all of them, have any of them hit the 20% standard, 200-foot supermajority requirement, or
No, so none of the cases have the supermajority. None of them triggered the supermajority.
none of them today? Thanks.
Moving on to our type 2s. The first one is 3312 Cuic Drive. This is a two-bedroom home in South Waco in the Alta Vista neighborhood in District 2. The owner splits her time at this house and then lives in Midland, Texas, I believe, the rest of the time. Does have a local management company. We had 39 notices on this one and 0 returned. Plan Commission did recommend this one by a vote of 7-3. This is a double lot. The house is on one of the lots, and then the lot next to it is vacant, owned by the same owner. Has plenty of parking to meet the parking requirements for a two-bedroom home.
Clint, do you know if this one has been operating as an STR already?
No, it has not.
Did you just say the owner lives immediately next door?
No, the owner owns a vacant lot next door.
Okay.
The owner splits her time from this house, and then I believe it's Midland. And so when she's out of town, she'll be renting that, wants to rent the house out for a short-term rental. But does have a local management company that will manage the property. The next short-term rental type 2 is 3313 Cliffdale Drive. This is a single-family home near Lakeshore Drive and Macarthur Drive in District 5 in the Cedar Ridge Neighborhood Association. You can see the property there. This is actually one that came to council back in 2019 and was turned down by council due to the neighborhood submitting a petition in opposition. Since that time, the owner, it's the same owner that brought that application back in 2019. The owner's been working with their neighbors to address all their concerns. And this time around, there was only one of the neighbors that voiced opposition. Because of that, the Plan Commission voted 8-2 to approve this one. And this was a recently renovated home. She's been working on the house to renovate it, 3-bedroom home. The next one is another short-term rental type 2, another recently renovated home in the Dean Highland neighborhood at 2710 Cumberland Avenue in District 4. This is a 2-bedroom home. R1B zoning, there's not any other type 2s within 500 feet. You can see there they have parking there, and then here's the home. They just recently repaved the driveway and fixed up the house. We did receive 2 notices back on this one out of 29, one in favor and then one with questions, and we were able to answer the questions, and the neighbor was not opposed after we answered those questions. And Plan Commission voted 8-2 to recommend this one. All right, so we're moving over to our type 3s, which are multifamily properties. The first one is actually an amendment to a special permit to Beasley Construction at property located at 511 South 10th Street. Short-term rental type 3 special permit was issued by the City Council, approved by the City Council back in January of 2021. This is a newly constructed 4-unit complex that was built specifically for short-term rentals, and the owner is in the process of trying to sell the property and is asking to amend the special permit to allow the permit to be transferred. Typically, all our special permits for short-term rentals are non-transferable. In this case, the owner has requested that it could be transferred. This property is unique for short-term rental type 3. Most of our short-term rental type 3s are either apartment complexes or properties that have full dwelling units on it. This one was built a little bit different. They are full dwelling units, 4 different dwelling units, but they're each a single family. They're 677 square feet, and I'll show you some pictures of them in a second. But they really weren't built for long-term residential use. They have smaller kitchenettes and don't have washer and dryers. So they're really set up for short-term rentals. And that's the reason why they're requesting the transferability on the permit. Here's the property. You can see you can see the 4 units there on the site plan. Each have they're 1-bedroom units, 1-bedroom lofts. They have plenty of parking for the units. They did pave the alley and have their trash pickup off the back. Here's a picture of it, the 4 units. And then here's some just interior pictures. You can see the kitchen isn't really a full kitchen. It's more of a kitchenette. Again, these could be used for long-term rentals, but really they're set up for short-term rentals.
Clint, can you give, since this is kind of a unique one in terms of asking for a transfer as opposed to just a normal application that came in the pipeline, how long has that application, when was the application originally granted, and how long have these been functioning as short-term rentals?
So this was just built, finished construction last year, and the permit was approved January of this year. So it's just a 8-month-old permit that's been operating for.
And they are in current use right now as permitted short-term rentals?
Correct.
Okay.
And they're 4 individuals, so each one is rented out separately.
Okay. All right.
To follow on Josh's train of thought, then this assignment would only take them through January of 2022 then, right? Or is it a 1-year permit? Or I'm trying to remember.
No, so the special permits now do not have time periods on them. The license requirements every 2 years. And so what we did, working with the owner, and because it is a unique situation, we did, staff and the Plan Commission both recommended approval of changing that language that would allow transferability, but we put some conditions on that. And really, the conditions are, basically the physical shape of and setup of the property would have to stay in place. So as long as the short-term rental units are just equipped with the kitchenettes, which is the bar, sink, microwave, and mini fridge, instead of a full kitchen, and then the short-term rentals remain without the laundry facilities, and then they're rented out to separate groups instead of as one large group, then the recommendation is it can be transferred. If the units are remodeled and more set up towards long-term rentals, then that transferability goes away.
And that would be the really only option, correct, is if they remodeled them all, because as they're set right now, they're not designed for any long-term.
That's correct. I mean, somebody could live in there long-term, but they're really not set up for that. That's right.
Not if they want Thanksgiving dinner.
That's right. Yeah.
So Clint, on these,
Turkey TV dinners are pretty
Hungry
recent.
yeah, that's kind of, they got some limited options there.
So that's why we felt like in this case, where most of all the other STR3s that you'll see on this agenda, and most of the other ones you've seen and approved without transferability, are full dwelling units that are set up for long-term rentals.
Right.
But since this application came in the pipeline before the ordinance change for this request of transferability, correct? It came in before?
That's correct.
So the next, if granted, the next owner would be unable to similarly apply for a transfer, because is that correct?
If this is approved, as long as the units stay the way they are right now, then it can be transferred to different owners without
Going
and still
forward.
be in compliance with the ordinance.
So like unlimited transfers
Right.
going forward. So it's kind of removing any barrier to transferability. going
Unless they
forward.
remodel the units and make them more set up for long-term rentals, and then that transferability goes away.
Okay, that makes sense.
And they meet the parking requirements for STRs?
Yes, sir. Yep. We did receive some opposition on this one. We mailed out the 37 notices and had 2 returned opposed. It did not trigger the supermajority requirement. And we did have 1 speaker at the Plan Commission that spoke in opposition. Plan Commission did recommend approval by a vote of 9-0 with 1 abstention to approve the amendment to the special permit.
And Clint, those notices went out to the homeowners and or tenants of the surrounding area, correct?
Correct,
And it also went to the neighborhood association?
correct.
Okay.
Which this is, I didn't mention that, this is in the Downtown Neighborhood Association.
Clint, do you see any downside to allowing it to transfer
I do not.
for this property, a property like this?
It's, you know, yeah, I mean, because it was built the way it's built, I don't, effectively, if we don't approve this, this would force the new owner to renovate a building that was just finished construction a year ago. And I don't think that's, you know, fair, yeah.
Great, thank you.
The next STR3 is a request at 2326 Austin Avenue. This is located at the intersection of Austin Avenue and South 24th Street in the Austin Avenue Neighborhood Association, Council District 4. This is an existing 7-unit apartment complex that's being renovated. They recently added a new driveway and some parking. It is zoned 03. There's actually a fourplex up front that when you drive down Austin Avenue, it looks like an old home. These units were built in the 1920s and probably was a single-family home that was converted into 4 dwelling units. So they are requesting that 2 of those units, 2 out of the 4 of the main building be used for STRs, and then 1 of the 3 outbuildings be used as STRs, so 3 out of the 7. Here's the property. This is coming down Austin Avenue. This is the fourplex here. And then this is on 24th Street. And then this unit right here, which is a 2-bedroom house, is the 3rd unit that they would like to rent out for STR. So you would have 3 STR, potentially 3 STR units, and then 4 long-term rental units. This is the new driveway they built off Austin Avenue. It's hard to see, but there is a parking lot up here. I believe there used to be a building there, so there's an old slab, and I think at some point it was used as a tennis court, but now it's set up for parking. We mailed out 33 notices on this one, had 0 return. Plan Commission recommended this one by a vote of 8-2. The next one.
I had a thought, before we move on, the one previously to this, that was the 4 build, that's the complex that is not made for long-term living. Should there be a clawback, or should the ability to transfer, the transferability be voided if there are permits to renovate?
That is.
Sorry.
We could add that language. That is this section right here. It is intended, so if they renovate it to put in a full kitchen or renovate to put in laundry.
It was written that way, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, that's the intent of that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
Sure, no problem. All right, so
2020. Come on.
yeah. So 581 is another complex that's in Austin Avenue Neighborhood Association. This is 2200 Columbus. This is the apartment complex, townhouse that was built in 2015 that has 24 units. I believe it's called Columbus Square. You can see here that it's got the parking off the alley. They built the alley and put parking here. They are requesting to rent out 5 of the 24 units for short-term rental. Again, on this one, we had 42 notices mailed. We had 2 returned, but with no comment. And the Plan Commission recommended 9-1.
Would you happen to know, just out of curiosity, if this is apartments for students or families, young adults?
So these are 2-bedroom. I believe most of these are 2-bedroom units. I think it's not student housing. I don't think it's targeted towards students. I believe it's a mix of professionals. There may be.
I actually lived there at one point, and it was mostly super young professionals, grad
Yeah.
students.
Yeah. I'm not saying there's not students that live there, but it's not geared towards
Okay.
students.
Would all of the units be in one area? Is that,
So they did not specify the specific units. I think they just want to have the ability to rent a max of 5 out.
because that's the maximum amount that they could?
Yes, ma'am. And then the next one is also owned by Beltex Assets. This is the one at Tinsley Place at 715 Cleveland Avenue.
This one is predominantly students.
This one does have more students in it. Again, it's not geared towards student housing, but there are more, because it's closer to a lot closer to campus.
Yeah, there's probably 70% student
Yeah.
probably here.
It's a larger complex. It's 160 units. Again, they've requested a maximum of 5 units. This is along between 7th and 8th on Cleveland Avenue. Tinsley Place Apartments that was built. This is a little older than the Columbus one, about 10 years old. Mailed out 64 notices on this one and had 0 return. It's set up, it's got the adequate parking. They built it with 1 space per bedroom. It's got a mix of units in there, 3, 2, and 1 bedrooms. And Plan Commission did recommend this one by a vote of 9-1. The next one is 583, is at 1500 West Lakeshore Drive. This is for a specific unit, 103 in Building 1. This is actually a condominium unit, so each unit is individually owned. This is in our Cedar Ridge neighborhood in Council District 1. This is right off Lakeshore Drive near MCC. There are actually 52 condo units in this complex with 34 different owners, and then 14 of those owners actually live in the complex. This one is a downstairs unit, and we did receive a letter in support from the condo association saying they were okay with it. We did receive one other letter of support from one of the owners that lives on the complex. We couldn't tell which building they live in, but we did receive 2 in opposition, one being the unit directly above this one, and then one being in an adjacent building. Plan Commission did recommend by a vote of 9-1 on this one to approve it.
And you said that I wasn't clear in reading the letter from the condo association that they were necessarily supportive. I think that they said they weren't in opposition. So
Yes,
I was like,
yes.
that's not the same thing, I don't
Yes.
think. And when I read it, I was like, this is worded very carefully.
I think maybe it doesn't violate any of their requirements.
Okay.
Is probably what it yeah.
That's
That is not-
kind of what I got. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure I was not reading in.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. Thank
I don't disagree with that.
Nah. There it is. But there was only the one opposition
There was 2.
officially. Two
yeah.
officially.
One that was in the same building, and then another one that was in a different building. And then the last one, 584, is for a triplex for 3 units at 629 South 5th Street. This is, again, in the Downtown Neighborhood Association in Council District 2. This is a property in between, along 5th Street between Clay and Cleveland, in that area between downtown and I-35. 02. Again, they're requesting the ability to rent out there's just 3 units in here that all 3 of them could be short-term rentals if approved. This is the complex here. It's actually just this white building. The building next to it's a separate property. And then on this one we had, let me get to it, 14 notices on this one and 0 returned. And the Plan Commission did recommend 8-2 on that one.
So there's only 3 units in the entire complex,
That's correct.
but it's backed up to a apartment complex that's student housing as well?
So the Belmont addition is right next door. Again, that is probably a mix of student housing. It's not specifically set up for student housing, but just being that close to campus, there probably is some students that live in that. I think most of those are one and two bedroom units. Typically, you see more of the student housing set up with 3 and 4 bedroom units. And that's all of them.
Hey, Clint. Any more questions for Clint?
Thank you.
One future agenda item that I just want to throw out there is in response to all of that new development going in by the McGregor Airport. I do think that it's just important that we continue to have conversations around planning out that part of the community with the commercial aspects to development, as well as other public amenities like parks and other things. So there's a lot of houses going up out there, and we want to make sure that we're building up those parts of the city with our long-term goggles on, but exciting. So thanks, Clint.
All right, Mayor, our last work session we're going to have today is work session 566. It's a discussion of the Health District's updated response to the COVID-19 pandemic. LaShonda Meyerly-Horn's joining us today, our Director of Public Health, and we'll be updating the council and the public on our collective and actually quite strategic efforts to fend off COVID-19 in our community. LaShonda?
Thank you, Bradley. Mayor, Meet Council. Today I'll give you all an update on the ongoing COVID-19 response by the Waco-McLennan County Public Health District. The dedicated and professional public health team at the Waco-McLennan County Health District has been actively monitoring the spread of COVID-19 in the community. The epidemiology team at the health district, led by senior epidemiologist Vidahi Shah, have been actively monitoring the spread of COVID-19 in McLennan County. Today, I've invited Vidahi to be here with me in case there's any questions specific to the data. Since April, there has been a drastic increase in the number of COVID-19 cases reported daily. As you can see on this graph, the 7-day running average of the reported COVID-19 cases at the end of April was 31.86, and as of September 3rd, the 7-day running average had increased to 281. Please note some key dates on the graph. On March 2nd, the Texas mask mandate was lifted and businesses were allowed to reopen at 100% capacity. On March 29th, everyone over the age of 16 became eligible to receive vaccines, and local school districts started school in the middle of August, around August, I guess 17th-ish. The increase in the case of reported, increases in the cases reported continued throughout the summer between July 1st and September 3rd. There was a 2,082% increase in the number of COVID-19 cases reported in McLennan County. This steady increase was extremely alarming for health district staff and our local health authority, Dr. Farley Verner. As expected, an increased number of cases reported resulted in an increased number of hospitalizations. At the close of April, the 7-day running average of COVID-19 positive patients admitted into the hospital was 15. As of Friday, September 3rd, the 7-day running average had increased to 186. This map shows the hospitalizations based on zip code. The areas with the darkest shades of green saw the highest number of hospitalizations, and these are also the areas with the lowest vaccination rates. Beginning August 23rd, the Heart of Texas Regional Advisory Council began providing data to the health district with the vaccination status of COVID-19 patients hospitalized or on vents. The information provided reinforced the message being promoted by the health district, the Texas Department of State Health Services, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The COVID-19 vaccine products are safe, effective, and can prevent the spread of disease, hospitalization, and death. As you can see on this slide, and these numbers will be reflected in the email that I send you guys daily, but 95% of the patients that are in the hospital have been unvaccinated, and those that are on vents are 96.5%. This slide just sums up the impact of the Delta variant and what it's done as far as it relates to COVID-19 cases. The steep increases in the cases can be attributed to the highly contagious Delta variant, which is more than 2 times as contagious as previous variants. Dr. Jennifer Schufert, the chief state epidemiologist, reiterates on a weekly basis that 99% of the COVID-19 cases reported to the state can be attributed to this highly contagious Delta variant. Also, data suggests that the Delta variant might cause more severe illness than previous strains in unvaccinated persons. And also, all the currently available COVID-19 vaccines are effective against the Delta variant. The spike in COVID-19 cases and hospitalizations was followed by a spike in deaths. In August, there were 66 deaths caused by COVID-19 infection. Since the start of the pandemic, there have been 548 McLennan County residents that have lost their lives to COVID-19, and this data is based on Friday's information, but today our number has increased and there have been 563 deaths attributed to COVID. These deaths are not just numbers, but are indeed mothers, fathers, daughters, sons, friends, co-workers, and loved ones that are no longer with us. Daily, our staff mourn with these families and are hopeful that our vaccine and education efforts can be better received. This map shows fatalities based on zip code, and once again, you can see that those with the darkest shades of green have the highest percentages of fatalities, and these are our areas with the lowest vaccination rates.
Under this map and the map prior, this is the entire zip code, not just city limits, correct?
Yes,
Because we have some zip codes that go,
Yeah.
that cross cities. Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
Our vaccination efforts continue, and as we saw an increase in cases, we began to see an increase in vaccine uptake. This increase was the result of expanded outreach efforts by our COVID-19 vaccine coordinator, Mr. Pablo Ramos, and includes collaborations and partnerships with churches, local school districts, higher education, and businesses. This map shows the vaccine uptake based on zip code. The areas shaded the darkest shades of green have the highest percentages of people vaccinated, fully vaccinated, and the areas with the lightest shades of green have the lowest vaccine uptake. This is reflective to what we've seen in the hospitalizations and deaths as well. The Health Disparities Grant recently received and the CARES Act Round 4 funding will provide resources needed to do direct and targeted outreach, including media, town halls, focus groups, and collaborative partnership development to increase vaccination rates, specifically in zip codes and census tracts with the lowest rates of uptake, which happen to also be the areas in the county with the highest number of Black and Hispanic residents. The red dots represent the locations that we've had our community-based vaccine clinics. The data is used to drive the clinics, but we have to have locations and partners willing to host us. This is just a summary update about our vaccination clinics. We're still doing more than 10 mobile clinics across the county each week. We have daily requests for vaccine efforts, and we're being able to fill those within 24 to 48 hours. Our strike teams will host the clinics in the PTR for the next 2 weeks, and then the National Guard staff will return. And all 3 of our COVID-19 vaccine products are currently available at the McLennan County Health District. We'll look at some trends and demographics. Before April, the largest percentage of deaths were seen in adults ages 80 and older. If you look at this graph, you can see that since April, we're seeing adults of all ages fallen victim to COVID-19. Adults aged 40 to 70 attributed to the highest percentage of deaths in April. Also, we have to remember that our senior adults were early adopters and uptakers of COVID-19 vaccines, so we're seeing lower rates for them. Prior to April, hospitalizations were mostly prevalent amongst those ages 60 and older. Since April, younger adults are being hospitalized and more frequently. So the blue line shows the hospitalizations before April, and then the red is the percentage since April. So you can see that young adults between the ages of 20 and 50, or I guess 60, are really starting to see an increased amount of hospitalizations. This slide contains demographic information regarding the percentages of cases, hospitalizations, and fatalities since April for Hispanic, white, Black, and other and unknown populations in McLennan County. We still see a large chunk, well, we've seen an increase since April of white residents being disproportionately impacted now at this point by death from COVID-19. And this next slide shows that since April and based on our data, women are more likely to become infected with COVID-19 and hospitalized, but men are the majority of our fatalities. But the numbers are pretty equal. It's not too off balance. This particular slide gives a little bit of a breakdown of ages, and you can see the percent of cases since April, and as well as hospitalizations and fatalities based on age. And it goes as far as to people younger than the age of 1 and as old as 80. As you can see, young adults ages 20 to 59 have had the highest percentage of COVID-19 infections in the county, and those between the ages of 30 and 79 make up the highest percentage of those hospitalized, while adults over the age of 50 continue to be the highest percentage of fatalities. Our testing efforts continue, and we're now hosting community testing in 2 different locations, and it has been being utilized at this point to the max capacity. Davico is the contractor that we're working with. They provide a PCR self-administered shallow nasal swab test, and there is a pretty significant turnaround time of 48 to 72 hours. We're asking people to provide their insurance cards. If they're not insured, they're able to bill the CARES Act funding for these tests, and there's no fee to the city or the health district for these tests. The 2 locations are the Waco ISD Stadium parking lot and then the McLennan County College parking lot, and those 2 locations are seeing about 200 to 300 people a day for testing. And we graciously thank both the school district and the McLennan County College for allowing us to use their space and their campuses for these community testings. We continue to work with the school districts to try to provide technical assistance and support to the superintendents and the school nurses. We're available to them pretty much 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our epidemiology, Lacey, is constantly on the phone with school nurses and trying to make sure they understand the contact tracing process. We offer COVID-19 vaccine clinics at the school districts, and we've also helped several of the schools access additional rapid tests so they can test their students and staff. An important part of getting ahead of this pandemic is to ensure accurate information and data are available to the community. The Waco, and so what we're doing is running a weekly Sunday paper ad in the Trib to announce upcoming vaccine clinics. We've also listed radio ads for August and September with LA, Power 108, and 94.5 The Beat. We have digital media ads that you may hear via Spotify, Pandora, and other streaming services. And we've continued to expand our vaccine ambassador program. And working with, in conjunction with the Waco Foundation and the Health Response Team, there's a ZOMAD media campaign that's going to use local influencers to try to impact our vaccine uptake. Waco and McLennan County is one of the first communities in Texas to use paid social media influencers to try to move the bar on getting people to get a vaccine. And this campaign complements the work that's been done by the Health District's Vaccine Ambassador Program. All of the social media influencers will be trained as vaccine ambassadors by our health education supervisor, Ashley Williams, and her team. And this approach ensures that the quality of the information and content being developed is actually accurate and in line with public health best practice. So lastly, and in closing, on behalf of myself and the whole health district team, I'd like to thank our city manager, Bradley Ford, our deputy city manager, Deidre Emerson, Mayor Meat, Mayor Pro Tem Sabito, and the entire city council for your support as we continue to work toward stopping the spread of COVID-19 in our community. Your leadership is appreciated and doesn't go unnoticed. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Any questions for Ms. Mallory?
Thank you for your presentation, but moreover, thank you for your commitment and dedication to this work. We understand it's not easy, and we understand that you all have not stopped. And so just as, you know, you credit us, we can't, I mean, this information can't be presented with the intensity that it deserves without the work that you all, your whole staff has done. I know you're tired, and I know you're worn out, and it's harder and harder each day as you see these numbers. Sitting up here while, you know, as you were sitting down, I looked up and saw your email and literally gasped. So I can imagine what you do when you open your box every day. So just know that we appreciate the work that you all have done from the first day one to today, tomorrow, but we're committed to doing all the work that we can to try to address this and get it under some sort of control. Whatever work, I applaud the efforts with the non-traditional methods to get people to understand and potentially serve as ambassadors for the vaccine. I know the folks in my district that are vaccine ambassadors, I mean, they take it so seriously. And, you know, I got a call from one weekend, Sunday morning actually, well, afternoon right after church, and he was just in tears because, you know, the people who he's been trying to get vaccinated haven't been and are ill. And it's hard because it's like I'm trying to tell you that, you know, you are COVID positive, you need to go to the hospital because that's how people are dying. You know, we unfortunately buried 2 of my family members on Saturday, same house, non-vaccinated. The people are dying. They've been dying, but they're dying at a faster rate. And you know, we continue to talk about this Delta variant. We haven't seen any other evidences of other variants here yet, have we? Okay, and that's a good thing. But it is in existence, and you know, it's one of those things that if we can't even get in front of this, you know, in the iteration. So I'm glad to see the testing facilities back open. That was important. I am encouraging people who, you know, have access, if you're at your schools for, you know, because I have one in middle school, one in high school, they both have been sent home with a note. So we go up to the nurse's office, sign the paper, yes, you can test them. Because they need to get tested. My husband works in education, so it is cyclical, and the testing is as important as the vaccination. Do we have even though there's uncertainty right now of the guidelines, how the booster is rolling out? Because I know that, you know, it is available for those who pre-existings. And so am I to assume that the health district is also providing the booster shots for those who qualify? Yes? Isn't that what I read?
At this time, we're offering the 3rd dose for those that are immunocompromised.
Yes, ma'am.
And they'll, you know, they have to attest to meeting one of the conditions.
Yes, ma'am.
And after September 15th, is it 20th?
I thought.
That's when we'll start making plans to offer an additional dose. But we'll wait on guidance from DSHS because we want to make sure that we still have adequate vaccine to get people vaccinated the first time around.
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
Yes, I want to echo my fellow council members' comments about all the good work that the Public Health District is doing. Greatly appreciate it. I also feel like just the inclusion of the unvaccinated percentage of the hospitalized and on vents is such a strong factual presentation that really strikes to the heart of the problem. And because those numbers generally, I mean, weirdly correspond with the effectiveness of the vaccine. I guess I've got 2 questions that are pretty brief. The first is, it seems what I've heard from some physician friends is that those who are vaccinated who are hospitalized generally fall into the pretty severely immunocompromised category. Y'all are seeing generally cancer patients, dialysis. What type of, you know, who among the vaccinated are y'all seeing generally hospitalized and or on vents?
So from whatever data we have, I can say yes, that several of our vaccinated individuals who have been in the hospital have some kind of pre-existing conditions. when it comes to severity or if their illness is more severe, I think a physician from one of the hospitals would have better information on that.
Okay.
And if I may really quickly of note, as of today, 94% of patients with COVID-19 in Waco hospitals, again, 94% of those are unvaccinated. So the folks you're talking about even still is somewhere between 5 to 6 people, 5 to 6% of people hospitalized. And that doesn't take away from your question, but.
No, absolutely. And yeah, Mayor, I deeply appreciate that. And then the only other silver lining I see, and I don't mean this as an argument against masks in schools, because I think that children can still spread it, obviously, but it appears we haven't had a single, essentially elementary age child or a child 1 to 9 be hospitalized since April. That's what the numbers appeared to be.
So you can answer more about that, but based on what we understand from our hospitals, when a pediatric patient gets serious, they transfer the patient to a hospital outside McLennan County.
Okay.
That is why we don't have those numbers in our data, because any pediatric patients are sent outside the county.
So not that it's not happening, it's just that
That's
it's
right.
not recorded, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
That might be a data point that's worth trying to explore further. I don't know how you obtain the number of individuals from school-age children from McLennan County that are hospitalized, but out in a hospital outside of county. But
Wouldn't it be in the
I'm
same
sure-
vein that the numbers that we get, they says this is the number and these are the numbers of people who are not McLennan County residents?
That is-
So, but I don't know if they separate out in that, so it would say I'm assuming it's Bell County. I'm not a Bell County resident, but I belong to this county.
So that information comes to us from the RAC, and the way it comes, it's not extremely clear on who is where. So we would have to try to obtain that information from RACs that have pediatric hospitals to try to figure out which of our potential residents were hospitalized in other trauma service areas. So it would take a little bit of effort, and just based on the workload of everyone across the state, I don't know how far we would get down the road, but we could definitely look into it.
I hear that and appreciate it. And yeah, if we could look at it, that'd be great. But I totally understand that some of this data is just incredibly difficult to untease and be able to present, because if we're going to present something, it needs to be right. And I know that that's the standard with which you guys carry it. So understood loud and clear.
Thank you.
I'll just, 4 quick points. Yeah, I think this council feels a responsibility to make sure that our core responsibility is making sure those 650 beds hold up and staff holds up in this pandemic. I think last year when we were going through this without the vaccine, we had some, I think all of us were very uneasy what's going to happen. So, which is why we had, masks and all the extra precautions. I think at least I breathed a sigh of relief when the vaccine got here. Got the shots as soon as I could, and I thought maybe this is kind of the end of it. We'll see the economy come back to normal. So the second thing I want to say is pretty alarming, these numbers going up, because our vaccinations are under 50%, between 45 and 50, or between 40 and 50 in McLennan County. And to see the whole numbers come up, it's largely the unvaccinated. So if you're thinking about the population that's exposed, it's about half the population. So to see those numbers, I mean, it's very alarming to me. So I still just urge people to get vaccinated. I appreciate the mayor's work on again, we're kind of having this weekly reminder again, and other professionals in the community that have come forward. You, LaShonda, and the city folks. Dr. Holland has come forth with a very compelling message. Bradley Ford, all the staff here has done a great job. I'm ready for this economy to get back to normal, and everybody get back to normal, because when you're overloading the hospitals with COVID patients, they're not able to do the work that they need to do in the community. The cancer patients, the emergency patients, the elective surgeries, the non-elective surgeries. So again, I think this all comes back to the core of there's a vaccination available. Let's take advantage of it. So again, that's all I have there, Mayor. Thanks for your work, LaShonda.
I've had the distinct privilege of maybe sitting from a different point of view and working with you, LaShonda, and your team through the health district and strategic communication efforts. And so you've only been here 5 months, 4 months, 6 months. I'm sure you feel like it's been 6 years. But thank you for the work that you're doing, Betty He's doing. I know Deputy City Manager Emerson and City Manager Ford are heavily involved right now because of our current state. The leadership from Mayor Meek and what he provides and the hospitals. I mean, it really has taken a community effort to even get to this point. And so I'm even appreciative of our hospitals, our health district, our ISDs, other city governmental entities that have really just rolled up their sleeves and said, what can we do to help? And so thank you. Thank you. And I believe that still our better days are yet to come. So thank you.
Thank you all.
I'm just going to wrap up with a couple comments here. I appreciate this presentation so much, and more than that, I appreciate the work that our health district is doing. As a city department, I couldn't be more proud of our team. To the members of our community, know that this city, this council, this health district, our city staff are doing everything they can to stop the spread of this virus, to keep our community safe, to reduce hospital capacity. I want the City of Waco team to know that I hear and see the work that you're doing. Health District, I see the work you're doing. What you're doing matters. I know you're tired. I know you're burnt out. I know that it's hard, but it matters. In 2 weeks, we got 8,000 more vaccinations in this community. There's a lot of lives that got saved as a result of that 8,000 vaccinations in 2 weeks. And that is the result of your efforts to communicate, to offer free vaccinations, to strategically identify where we can set up these clinics. What you're doing matters, and I see it, and our city sees it. Since the beginning of this, hospital capacity, like Jim said, has been our primary concern. We're taking it incredibly seriously. This report shows the strategic work that we're doing. We're going to continue to do press conferences. We've done several hopefully thoughtful press conferences. We did a video last week. A couple of us just jumped up and did a video that kind of reminded us, was similar to the winter storm videos that we did to try to disseminate some information. We've overhauled covidwaco.com. I think it's looking so much better. I think the data points are so much more relevant for where we are in this stage of the pandemic. And we've kicked up the free testing and are doing the vaccination clinics and all the other work that you're doing, right down to this very presentation. We're running behind today, but it's like we got to get this presentation out because this might be just one more way to communicate to our community of the work that's being done and the state of things right now. And so, again, I'm just going to take a moment to urge anyone who has not received the vaccine to talk to your doctor, ask questions, and make a plan to get vaccinated. If you've been on the fence or have concerns about the safety or side effects, talk to your doctor just like you would any other health-related matters. And if for whatever reason you're going to choose not to get vaccinated, you can help too. You have to respect how contagious this variant is, and you have to adjust behaviors by doing things like wearing masks, social distancing, and avoiding crowds. And I know that's hard to hear, but that is where we are right now based on our hospital capacity. So I celebrate the 8,000 individuals who have been vaccinated in a short period of time. That's something that we need to mark down, but we got a long way to go. We still have, what's the percentage of vaccinated residents at this time? I'm putting you on the spot there.
Right now, we have about 45% of our community fully vaccinated.
So we have a long way to go. 330 trusted McLennan County doctors signed a letter saying that the vaccines are safe, that they work, and it's the best way to keep our residents safe. These are doctors that we've trusted for years, that we go to church with, that we see at the grocery store, that have coached our kids' Little League teams. These are people that we turn to for every other healthcare issue that we face. And so if 330 names are going to go there, I think it's something to weigh heavily. Again, as was mentioned, this is a resilient city, and I know we're going to get through this together. And I thank you for your time today.
Mayor Meek, if I can just add one thing that's happening out in the Mark community today. We had a man pass away from COVID-19 last week, and his family all plan to go get vaccinated at our clinic that we were hosting at Mark High School this afternoon so they can hopefully stop this from happening to anyone else in their family. So we felt like that was very powerful, and we were happy to be able to provide and offer that service to the family.
Incredibly meaningful. The work you're doing matters. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
All right. Are there any requests for future agenda items?
Just right quick, Mayor, I'm getting some feedback from citizens, and if we could get an informal report on property tax exemptions for seniors over 65, just what our policy is and maybe what peer cities are doing there in a future agenda item.
Great. Any others? We will recess the work session and reconvene the regular session for executive session as read into the record by the city secretary at 4:59 p.m.
Yes, Mayor and Council, notice is hereby given. The City Council will go into executive session in accordance with the following provisions. 1, attorney briefing, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.071, Texas Governor's Orders GA-38 and GA-39. 2, real property, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.072. 3, economic development, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.087, and 4, personnel, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.074, discussion of city secretary hiring process. We are now in executive session at 5 p.m.
We'll run a little bit late. Break and get back to executive session as quick as we can.